You went to the audience.
Present.
Those limitations at all?
Yes, it was one of the design considerations to make sure that it works offline. So in places where there's no internet connectivity, all you need to do is to go online once to get the public keys from the public key directory, and then you can operate for hours, days, even weeks. That machine needs to get online only to get access to the revocation list, which is something that can happen intermittently, but you don't need real-time connectivity. And in terms of does it work with small end kind of medium end devices or lower end? Yes, because the cryptography used is standard. It's something that goes really fast on the verification side of things. Yeah, I think, gentlemen.
You said in the presentation that you saw EU consensus, the administrator for this. So what do they actually have to administrate? What's on? Is it simply the public keys, or is there other information that they need to maintain on there as well that you're then caching, as you just described, in order to?
Yeah, so they have to, basically the public key directory that's set up it's supposed to exist in sort of a Switzerland type neutral entity. And they're basically going to just be intaking any new updates to the public keys that come in, the revocation list, et cetera, and keeping an updated kind of chunk master list for when someone comes back online and wants to renew the information that they have, so that they have the ability to to do that on maybe a monthly basis, or it just depends on the use case, I guess.
Yep.
I want to understand conceptually what's going on. Is now Lucidity a relying party towards Yoti and Yoti a relying party towards Lucidity? Is that what's happening?
Yeah, so we've proven interoperability both ways. So the first one, Yoti was issuing the credential and Lucidity was verifying. And then we've also done it the other way, where Lucidity issues the credential and Yoti verifies, just to close the loop.
And how does it affect your legal responsibilities to have two roles rather than one?
Yeah, it's a good question, because the issuer needs to ensure, and that's why a governance structure and certification body is important, to make sure that when we create the credential, we can be trusted, right? And the processes that we put in place, they have to be audited and certified. On the verification side of things, I think it's also important to do the certification in terms of are they using the right type of cryptography? Are they actually using the public keys to verify the credentials? But I think the requirements of certification are lower on the verification side of things than on the IDP issuance side.
I'm asking this because the CNIL just had a presentation and they were saying like there should be an absolute separation between the two roles to just make sure that there's no profiling going on. If you have two roles, you have got a lot of profiling options. How would you deal with that?
Yeah, so we provide options to the consumers to use. So some consumer may choose the Yoti wallet to be their consumer-friendly, credential wallet. But then what happens is that they're gonna go to a supermarket, right, or online service. They will choose their verification party provider, right? And that particular verification party, they may choose Yoti or someone else in the ecosystem to do the verification. Does this open a potential privacy issue if one entity is also at the same time the issuer and the verifier? In a way, but these identifiers is a one-off. It's not correlated to name or biographic information of the user, so it's quite anonymous. The information that gets exchanged is not a wider identity credential that has address or last name or things like
You
that.
have to share a private key. I mean, you know that it's the same user. So all the transactions as metadata are retractable to the same user.
Well, so the payload, it will be different every single time because the timestamp changes
Of course.
and also the identifier changes, and then it gets signed with the private key. But you cannot tell which private key you're using, right, on the verification side. Otherwise, it wouldn't be private
But don't you
anymore.
keep logs?
Pardon?
You have to keep logs. So a good order to put might find those trails or not.
Well, so the system is designed so the verification happens without logs, other than for billing purposes, in terms of you're counting how many shares from an issuer are being consumed from a verifier. So, for example, you can say at the end of the month, X amount of checks were coming from Yoti or for Lucidity for billing purposes, but that doesn't contain any PII information, just aggregated information. Account.
I think it's fair to say, just to follow up on that point, that the reader software is not necessarily, it wouldn't normally be the same issuer and reader. It would be in some other system that understood it, and not necessarily one of our systems
No,
or
it's just
anybody else.
linked to your pilot here
Yeah.
going on.
Yeah.
But I get.
Is the payload and signature encrypted or just compressed?
So I think for this POC it was plain text,
Yeah.
but there is nothing stopping from a different implementation to also encrypt the payload to ensure confidentiality. So that's something that can be add-on. So the verifier will need a private key to decrypt the payload of the information and then process to the verification, which is what we've shown. So it could work also with the encrypted payloads.
How do you determine which public key to apply to a token?
So you would have to use either a shared decryption key across the different members, or there are some kind of multi-party computation decryption algos which you could use, but because otherwise you would need to know which verifier public key you need to encrypt it specifically for that particular entity to decrypt it.
So how do you authenticate that it's from a specific provider?
So you are verifying the signature of the payload from that particular issuer. Yeah.
Okay, so there's each issuer has a private key that they use to sign.
Each issuer will have a key pair, a public key,
Yes.
and also a private key, which they use for digital signatures. Yes.
So if the payload is encrypted at some point, how would you know who that's from? To make
Yeah,
it easier?
but that will be a higher level layer, right? So that will deal with encryption, which is independent from what you're doing from the verification standpoint. So that's something that you would add. Is not on the scope of this pilot, but you could enable the encryption to ensure confidentiality as well. Yes.
So there was an option to put the geolocation. I was wondering, can you make it location binding, like it works only in a particular region or in a particular country?
Yeah, precisely. So that's why we, as an option, you can ensure that that credential can be only verified in a particular place. So you don't have a credential that can be used anywhere in the world, but you're, for example, approaching a particular supermarket at a generation time of the credential. You are binding that credential to a GPS location, plus say 100 meters around, right? And that ensures that there are no relay attacks, so that credential cannot be used somewhere else. So it's a nice way to mitigate that risk.
Yeah, any way to do based on the IP, like in some countries, regulators want you to do this thing only in their country, then you have to press the public IP. So
yeah, so the geolocation attribute is open. It can be a GPS location, but it could be a particular IP range, which is connected to a particular geographic area. Yeah.
I think, well,
Maybe last
let's make
question.
the last question because I think we're past our time.
So you mentioned billing there, which, given you're working offline, presumably the billing settlement is done later when you get back online.
Mhm.
Who do you see then processing that billing? Is that same independent authority who's
Yeah.
administering the certificate, or is it
Yeah.
somebody else?
I think more likely that would be the case. You'd have some tallying process that would happen periodically, particularly if the devices were offline for a period. They're not going to be offline for weeks and weeks because obviously, as we said, revocation lists need to be dealt with. New issuers coming on as well obviously need to be dealt with as well. So that would happen fairly frequently. So that tallying process would, obviously something in addition to what we demonstrated here, but you definitely need that.
Well, the nature of my question is, you've got two functions here: you've got security,
Yeah.
which is what you're addressing with the
Yeah.
public key infrastructure,
Yeah.
and you've got commercial aspects.
Yes.
Do you see those as necessarily being the same body doing it, or could they be separate?
They don't have to be the same. They could be separate. It just depends on the implementation.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
this session should be open.
Yes,
And this comment section, which should be about age assurance in the Scottish Devolved administration.
Right.
Then,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you for
very good, guys.
Apologies to the online participants because we didn't have the chance to take any of your questions, but we're happy to answer on the chat if you'd like to post it.
Make sure they use the token.